Welcome back to the last big show of the day, the discussion round, where we would like to discuss failure. So, fail it or nail it is the topic, and we have great people here who will introduce their personal view. And first of all, I'd like to introduce them and afterwards ask you in the audience, please, to also share your experiences and ask questions by using the chat or also the Q&A chat if you wish to. So let's introduce our audience here. Welcome to all of you. Next to me is Professor Andreas Thünnermann, Director of Fraunhofer IOF. Over there we have Dr. Falk Eilenberger. He's a research group leader, Institute of Applied Physics of Friedrich Schiller University in Jena. Then we have Dr. Hani Fatay. She's research group leader at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Light in Erlangen. We have Dr. Heike Riel. Maybe you heard her keynote in the morning already. She's head of science and technology and lead in IBM Research Quantum of Europe and Africa. And we also have here with us Professor Gerd Leuchs, who is the former director of the Max Planck Institute of the Science of Light, Erlangen. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are very much looking forward to your insights. And the idea of today is that you all prepare like a tiny statement, right? Like you just, you talk about all the details. So how about Mr. Eilenberger? You start. Would you like to start with your impulse statement?
Yeah, so I think failure is an important part of life, maybe even more so in science. Yeah, so science is failing yourself to success. And it's frequently that you are in the lab trying to get an experiment to work, and you fail and you fail and you fail. But if you learn something from each stage of failure, you still can make some progress. Yeah, and eventually you succeed. But you always have to keep in mind that the non-succeeding is the norm, because when you succeed, you have to move on and do something new and start failing again. So I think it's important as a scientist, but also in life in general, that you understand that it is normal to fail and that you need to move on and learn from that.
Very nice. Thank you for that. How about you, Mrs. Riel? Would you like to continue?
Of course, I think it's easily said failing is important. I think we have, at least from my experience, I have been grown up by that failing is something bad. Right? Because I think that's a typical culture we have in Germany, that failing is, if you fail, it's bad, so you shouldn't fail. But I think in the end, from the failures, you actually learn a lot. And I think that's what we need to get, I think, a bit of a different perspective on the failure. That we say, okay, I failed, but then analyze what should I have done better in order to succeed. And then from this, go to the next step. And in that regard, I think failing fast is kind of the motto of the current industries, because failing fast means you have a steep learning curve. Mm-hmm. If you remain of what you do and you are not failing, then you are not learning more, right? You keep kind of doing what you do. And if you try something new and you fail fast, then you have learned something and you can find the new path which brings you forward. So I think that's the motto also of many startups: fail fast, find your path, and then get successful. So I think we really have to change our attitude towards failure.
Interesting. Thank you very much for that. How about you, Mr. Thünnermann?
Well, I completely agree. Failure is part of our evolution. In fact, it is based, the human being is based on the evolution, and this of course means that there have been several passes during the past billion of years which has been evolved, and there are failures and there are winners, and based on this the human being in this form came up. So I really have to say that we have to learn from these failures on one hand side, and we have to accept, as Heike Riel just stated, that failure is a positive, or failing is a positive thing, meaning that from these a plan A, a plan B, a plan C can evolve, which helps us to survive and to develop new ideas.
Nice. I get here this misconception of that winners never fail. That's not so much true. I would like to hand over to you, Mrs. Fatay.
I think you can also look at it from another point of view, that failing means succeeding. So failing means that you succeeded to find to come to a conclusion that this approach doesn't work and this approach doesn't take you to where you want to go. And then I think all of us should take into account that many big things in science or in the world happened after big failures, because we found it the way that goes to the, we were on paths that went to the dead ends. And then at that point, we found out, okay, we need a new interpretation for a phenomena that we see. So failure is a path to success somehow. Right?
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Thank you very much. How about you, Mr. Leuch?
Well, sometimes it's good to remember what important people have said. And one of the statements by Einstein was, for an idea which does not seem crazy at first, there is no hope. So when you think about the ideas of what you could do, you should select the crazy ones. And if you go for the crazy ones, some are really crazy, but then I wouldn't say you do fail, but you get experience. So I think this is what some of the others also hinted at, that if you fail, you accumulate experience. And that's that's part of our strategy. So our lives are full of experience. And I was thinking, actually, the English word fail, if you read it backwards, it's life. So it's almost like failing is life. I mean, this is built in. So without this, no progress.
Very nice. So you in the audience, you see there's a very positive connotation with the word failure, so you wouldn't expect that. And I'm completely with you, especially in Germany. I feel like it's failure, it's no-go. You should not do that. You have to be perfect and so on. But we all know that, I mean, it's part of life. It's like learning to ride a bike. If you don't fall, you don't know how to stand up and make it better. However, I think many people are afraid to talk about things that did not go right. So you feel it, and of course you try to learn from it, but you don't talk to others because you have the feeling, it might be strange and the others might not respect you anymore so much. I was wondering how you think about that. So why are people so afraid of talking about failure? And what could we do to make it more, let's say, social norms, so they can really share their experiences and also share what they learn from it? Go ahead. You have you want to say something. Go ahead.
No, it's a very philosophical question, right? I think it's a cultural aspect that we are kind of coined for success, and that we don't want to talk about failure. And also, if you look actually at the science culture, right? I mean, in science, we only publish positive results. We would not be able to kind of write a paper and say these were our failures, right? we only kind of can publish typically things which are really worked out. And I think so.
Wouldn't it be nice to do it the other way around?
You would learn much more.
Exactly.
You would definitely learn a lot, right? And often, of course, a loss of efficiency is if people do the same failure again, right? Even if someone else does the same thing and it fails. So in the end, for progression of development and of research, it's good if you also could learn from other one's failures. But if you don't share them, then it's difficult to learn from it. And I think that's a part also of the culture, and these cultures are, you find them in many different areas. And what I've realized in our culture, we really would like to promote the culture that failure is not bad, right? That you can fail, but as said, it's a positive thing when you do it different and better next time. And I think that's really something which has to be conveyed as a positive thing. But I think from a societal culture, I think we grew up in a different way. But for a company culture, it's actually the bad thing. You would like to have this fast iterations and fast progress, and if you make a failure, that also your colleagues learn of it. Otherwise, it's lost time if someone else makes the same mistake.
I'd like to add on this question because you said in companies it's a bad thing.
No, I think in the society, I think it's a bad thing, right? Because when we grow up, at least when I grew up, it was not so much like nice if you fail, right?
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, we are also driven by the marketing system in the school and everything that you have to bring good marks and all this. And so it's not that you learn that from failure you can learn more and you can progress and you find new ways to go and new solutions. That's not so much, I think, in the teaching culture also, which we have, I think.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't say it properly. I meant it's bad for the companies that you do not communicate it.
Yes.
Because they would profit from, I think research in general would. So from your experience, all of you, do you share it more in companies, the failures? Do you really do that more than in research?
So I can't say whether it's more or less, but I think in our culture we try to really make like an analysis also if things haven't worked out, right? Sometimes you know immediately and you can share it with others that this doesn't work. But it's also the way of what is the right platform to share it.
So how about
I
you?
agree. I think it's a cultural thing, and it's different in different countries. And in Germany, I think it's changing now. But we did not have so many startups, and this was, I think, the reason was if you have a startup and you failed, at least when I was young, oh, this guy has failed. Never talk to him again. Whereas then I went to the United States, and then I found there that it was completely different. People who had failed with their company, they were in high demand because they know what you can do wrong and not repeat it and do something else. So it's a social thing.
Interesting.
Then you can ask the question, why is it so? And I once heard that if you look for solutions, the most efficient way looks a bit strange. And I was given the example of a rat which you confine in a box, and it tries to find an exit. So it doesn't go millimeter by millimeter, carefully look where the exit is. The rat runs here, runs there, runs there. It looks very erratic, and it doesn't look very controlled. And so people say, oh, and then to do all these failures. So you don't want to look like this. You want to have a plan and go in one direction and be successful. But this is not how it works. So in the end, you're not successful. So I think this is a disadvantage to have such a social pressure. But I think in Germany things are changing. We have much more startups now than we had before, and people are not afraid to have startups. So I think it has been more of a problem in the past. Maybe there is still some aspect of it, but I think we are on a good way. And it needs to be encouraged, and it has to be encouraged by society.
But I think it's also a question of taking risks. So are the people interested to take a risk? And of course, to take a risk means that there is a high probability that something went wrong. And I think that especially in Germany, this risk-taking is well, a challenging question, and I even see it in the laboratory when talking with the students. So one really has to push them to take a risk and try some specific experiment in order to learn what will happen in the next step.
People need to realize if you agree to be born, you also agree to die. So what bigger risk can you have?
It's kind of, you don't decide whether you want to be born or not. It just happens. What are your experiences?
I just wanted to add this, that I think we talk about failures in science, right? When you have a scientific publication, the first 2 paragraphs of the paper that you published is about the other methods, and you discuss why these other methods are not as good as this method, right? Or where they failed, right? But and then in the PhD thesis, the students just describe all the other ways and argue that why this new method or our new discovery is a better one. But maybe the language that is discussed, I mean, that things are written in a thesis or paper, well, they are always written in a very positive way, right? And when you are in your very early careers, maybe you don't see that. That, okay, this is actually is a criticism, and it doesn't mean that everyone succeeded. So, yeah, so I just wanted to add this, that we do communicate about our failures in science.
I'm actually not so sure, because when I mean, if you look at the processing of difficult things, right, you only show the process which has worked, but not the many other approaches which haven't worked. And of course, what you say is that was kind of the best of the state of the art at that time, which was a success at that time. What you phrase in the introduction, because failures are not mentioned before, right? I think when you look at fabrication, nanofabrication, there's so many things which don't work. I mean, and you never talk about them. They're never written anywhere. I mean, but of course, in your own documents, right, you have documented it in the lab book, but you would not move it forward as a publication, because it wouldn't be published, because it's a failure. So until you find the path which works, and then you only publish the path which works, and you reach the kind of new state of the art.
Everyone is interested to take the shortcut and not to travel around like the rat in the cage.
yes. Looks a bit, right? So, but I see also that I think the culture is changing, because we understand that if one has made this experience of failure, that you learned a lot, and you know you know how you should not do it, and you try another path which has a higher chance of success. What you mentioned also, the risk. Yes, risk-taking is definitely connected with also making failure. And the higher the risk is, the more you are likely to also fail, but also the higher the gain can be. Yeah. And that's something I think we often more think about, what we may lose than what we have the opportunity to gain.
Yeah. Two very different aspects. I thought it was very interesting what you said, that kind of it is being communicated, and you nodded. I feel like you have a similar experience. I also can share this. In my science background, I had exact the same thing, that you do not publish what did go wrong. So I did never write a paper about all the trillion things that did not work out. However, I put it in my PhD thesis, yes. And I was lucky enough to be in a huge lab, so we had like 50 people all working together, and we loved to drink coffee, so we always, in every tiny break, we discussed everything that went wrong, and we learned so much from it. So it was really interdisciplinary, and sometimes I was wishing for this to happen on a higher level, so that also in conferences, you really say, okay, and now it's like failure of the day, this did not work out. Then I managed to this and that.
Yeah, you just somehow don't get credit for failures. That's it, right?
Yeah, but why not say it and just say, I tried this. You know, I had this hypothesis. I tried this way, and everybody would be like, yeah. And then you're like, it did not work. It would be fun. It would be much more fun to discuss it. And then afterwards, in the sessions, that's where all this interaction takes place. At the posters, at dinner, etc. But not on a paper level. Yeah. So we could do it more, but still people are kind of afraid. So still, maybe we could work more on this normalization of failure, right?
If I'm not mistaken, I think like 100, 200 years ago, people worked like this. They put also those approaches that didn't work in their papers. But it was a different culture at the time. Maybe there was less competition or less stress, but I think in the old days, it was more like this.
They have had more time to write the paper.
So when I was working as a first-year student for the first professor I was working with, I came into his office and just asked him some question. I can't remember, and he was reading a paper, and he was like, "Fuck, hold on, just listen to the sentence." And the sentence said like, "For process XY method ABC has been established as a good standard." Yeah, and this is an important sentence, because underneath the sentence there's a whole bucket full of failed approaches. And nobody ever talks about these. Yeah, there's probably an entire PhD student that spent his PhD career into establishing this single sentence, and that was a great experience there, because he opened my eyes to the fact that there's just so much failed things that that you're just not talking about, and that this is important. Yeah, and
but he wouldn't have get a science or nature paper.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get any credit. Exactly.
That's true.
Right,
That's true.
exactly. The credit is not for failures, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least he made an effort to kind of
Yeah, that's
transport it to
important.
his
Yeah, that's
students that
important.
there is something there. You shouldn't just read over this and just think about what
but
works.
that's what I mean, right? Because since you don't get a science or nature, which is important for your career, in particular in the academia, etc., it's very difficult then to get the credit for it, what you mentioned.
So I think the point I was trying to make is to draw something positive of failure. This is also a question of the environment. Yeah, you need to have the opportunity to learn from that and to improve from that, and to not be downgraded for not having achieved something. This is not always the case. So sometimes you fail and you never learn why. Yeah, and sometimes you fail in an environment where you just don't get the second chance, and then failure is not a learning experience.
I think that's a very important point you actually bring up, because if you look at PhD thesis, and some can have like 5 papers, right, in the 3 years or whatever, and they may come into a lucky situation that there has been already quite some technology development before, and then it's ready for publication, and etc. And there are some other students where you need to develop a completely new tool or something, where there's not much before there, and then you may only do like 1 or 2 papers. And so it depends very much on what we use as a measurement also of the quality of the work, and of the whether the person is ready for a certain position or whatever. So it's really a lot also in the measurement system in the end, what people value or what is valued in the measurement system.
I just think it's interesting because it's a complete contradiction. Science, we all know science, that's how it works. You do something, you fail, you continue, etc. And then we don't act accordingly. So, okay, but let's come to a question from the audience. A key question in research is knowing when to give up and start trying a new path. So, question to you. Your expertise is asked now. How do you know when to give up, when to try just a little harder? This sounds so frustrating. What tips can you give?
Well, I think it's a question of communication. This is not easy to handle by oneself. One has to discuss these topics with colleagues and to get an impression. And from my point of view, it's the discussion today is a little bit going in the wrong direction. So Gerd has made a starting point which was very important from my point of view. We get experience. So and I think with every experiment we are doing, we are learning. And especially concerning the question which came up now, when to give up, if we exchange with our colleagues what we have learned, what was our experience in the past months, then of course they could also discuss with us and probably can give us an advice how to go on.
So you do encourage your students to come to you, and you have an open door, say like whatever it is?
Yeah, basically, of course, it's a question of time, but communication is a very important thing, and we have an open door culture in house, and of course we have to exchange our ideas, also our experiences in the different experiments in the different situations, and with this, of course, we can learn and we can develop a plan B, which might have success in a PhD thesis.
So how do you do it with your groups?
I think science, I follow up on your argument. I think science is about small steps. Of course, there are a few experiments that they were based on pure luck, but science is about small steps and learning from your failures, right? So when you are doing an experiment, then based on these small steps that you take, you can design what should be the next step. And if in this specific approach that you have, there is a next step, or you have to start to modify the approach that you are looking at the problem. So for me, there is no giving up somehow, because there is science is about finding ways by small steps. So by discussion and communication and brainstorming, then always there is a small step to take to come out of this.
But I think it's not only a small step. Sometimes you also need these high-risk things. I call it submarine projects.
Absolutely.
My co-workers hate it, but if a student, for example, comes up with an idea, then and it's a high-risk topic, then we start such a submarine project. And this might be a high risk taking, but big step forward in a specific situation.
Yeah, I mean the project can be it is big, right? You start something big, and something big doesn't come to a conclusion so fast, also, right?
Yeah.
So then you have to polish your observation after each measurement or devising, and take this small and not giving up. That's what I mean. Yeah, but I agree with high-risk approaches. Right?
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, so I find it quite interesting that in the French language, experiment is called expérience, which is to the point. But to your question, or to the question that you just read, what is the point when one should give up? I think this is missing the point. I think when you work on something, there are some things you don't understand. And so you try to understand. And as long as you have not understood, there is a good reason to continue, because there's something to discover. At some point, you may find reasons why you seem to understand everything, and it seems to be very logical and clear that this is a dead-end road. That is a point when it's very valid to say, look, probably I stop here. Still, you could miss a point and you think it's a dead-end road, and there's still a possibility to go on. But I mean, you can only see what you see. But as long as you try hard but you don't understand why it doesn't work, there's something missing. There's still something that you can learn, and everything that you learn, a big piece or a larger, smaller piece in the puzzle, that can help you in the future. So I think the point to stop is when you fully understand, or you think you fully understand, why you cannot proceed in this way. This is a good point to stop. And I think also I wanted to add, there's a difference between the student and the supervisor. The supervisor has a longer life in science, typically on average, because not every student stays in science. And so those things that have not worked out, I mean, you keep in your head and you typically come back to them. If you still have open questions and you do not fully understand why does it not work, with some other students, maybe some new techniques, you come back to this because you want to understand. So this, I think, is the way to stop really is only when you have understood that this is a dead end.
Thanks for adding that, because that was, just in a second, that was exactly my point, because as a student, you very often are just overwhelmed. And of course, you have, you see all this path, and the more you know, the more paths you see. So you never stop. I mean, we just yesterday had here the lecture of 40-year journey, and I think Professor Gensel is still kind of busy for the next 100 years. So, I mean, you never finish. And the question is, when you're so overwhelmed and you feel like, is it a dead end or rather not? I suppose the experience from you is super important, because you have in mind what did not work out previously, or which direction could be more promising maybe, because you have to publish the papers again, or you want to bring something into an application. This would be my perspective. Yes.
I just wanted to add on this, because I think it's a very different perspective also if depending on what mission you have and what you set yourself as a goal. I think it's important that you also know, what do I want to do? Do I want to kind of find a certain solution to a problem? Or do I want to gain the knowledge, right? Because with gaining knowledge, you can continue, of course, forever, because there's always something to learn. But we also know that sometimes if you start in a new area, then your learning curve is very steep, and then you get also further incremental. And so, of course, and if you are in a company, then at a certain, and we do research in a company, so we have to say, okay, what do we want to achieve? What problem do we want to solve? And then, of course, which path do we want to pursue? And this morning in the presentation, I also showed, look, there are different options of new devices we can investigate. But then at a certain point, you also have to focus on one. You see that this is a core which brings you the furthest. Because you have a limited amount of resources and you have a certain amount of time, you have to come to a conclusion and you have to come to solve a problem. And so I think it really depends on the perspective. And so I would say it's not easy to define when is the point to stop, and it depends also on what you want to achieve. So I think it's important also that you define your goal. Do you want to gain the knowledge, or do you want to solve a problem? And then do you want to find a certain path, not a certain technology development, but you want to solve the problem, and then you can go different routes and you find the best route? So I think it really depends on what you want to really
But do you
achieve.
want to publish fast?
Maybe a goal.
Yeah, there's so many different
But,
ones.
of course, and the goals may also change depending on which situation you are. I mean, from my experience, I have started after my PhD thesis, I have started a project on molecular electronics. And this was at that time a very hot topic to figure out, can individual molecules act like a transistor? Because they would have been the smallest device you can synthesize this in a certain manner, and so we found ways how to contact them, we found ways how to characterize them, and then realized, oh my God, the silicon technology, they also become smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And the contacting molecules got not easier, but the difficulty remained. Also the different approaches we looked at, and at a certain point said, look, it's not the path for solving our problem, and we stop it. And so for me, actually, it's, I try to ask myself also, am I working on the right thing at that moment? Or should I do something different which is more effective? And there is always, I think, a certain moment for how much time you spend on certain problems.
Which can be very personal again, as we just said.
Yeah.
PI might think differently about a topic in comparison to somebody who's like, I have to finish my PhD quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
How about you?
That's an important point, and kind of goes full circle onto the question that was asked from the audience. I think that's questions I and you frequently get from the master and PhD students. Yeah. So when do I stop? Which is fueled by their perception of the truth that they just have a limited amount of time for their thesis, and they feel like they're damned for success. Yeah. And what you need to convey to them is that it is so you need to be able to afford to fail, and you can only do so if you have a plan B. And you, as a supervisor, as something I learned from Andreas actually, need to make sure that these students have a plan B. Yeah, that a failure in a certain experiment is not the end of their career. Yeah, and so this brings me back to the culture. Yeah, so we need to establish a culture where this failure is acceptable. Yeah, and of course, I mean, I can't change the culture of Germany. Yeah, but I can make sure that at least, for example, in my group, that it is accepted that an experiment does not work. Yeah, and then if something does not work for a long time, we will all sit together and kind of devise a plan on how to proceed now. Yeah, and then.
And all of us are developing a plan B.
Yes.
So that there is a success and there is a thesis, that there is a publication which demonstrates also that some kind of success.
We want to encourage risk-taking, not gambling.
Yeah. Well, this means also empowering of people, of course. Yeah.
This is very important because I also see it as kind of the obligation of group leaders, of more experienced people, to give people a chance. So maybe you can also be more specific and talk from your experience. So in my case, for example, my group leader gave me several projects, and it was like characterization of novel proteins. So it's kind of whatever you do, something will come out. Because come on, it's a novel protein. So I had this publication for sure, no matter what happened. Our hypothesis did not work out at all. I had all this beautiful work done, and so I only had this tiny publication, but I had it. And I was very happy for that. And my feedback, like from my colleagues, when I was giving talks, they were like, "Did you try this?" I was like, "Yeah." "Did you try that?" "Yeah." "Why don't you do a knockout mouse model?" "I did." And everyone was like, "What?" So I did so many things, and it just did not work out. At the end, I only have this tiny publication, so it's kind of frustrating. But I had a good boss who supported me by letting me do other stuff. So maybe you can also be more specific, some experiences where you said, and this is what I did, or this is where I encourage my students, so that they know, maybe feel more safe.
So I think it is very helpful to make it clear to the new members in your group, the older know anyway, that you are in one boat. You're successful together. I mean, the science outcome is the science outcome of the group. The group leader benefits the same way as the bachelor student in the group benefits in different ways, but the success is joint success. And I think if this feeling is there, this makes people feel more secure. Not only in science, this is in any group. It's like this. But I was thinking when you said there are often so many possibilities and where should I go, that reminded me that, I mean, my life, I mean, I could talk until midnight. My life is so full of failures. I mean, you wouldn't imagine. And most of the failures are not trying and not really being able to go along in one direction, but not going in a direction, like missing, I mean, of the many things that you could do, missing a path that would have been successful, and other people do this, and then afterwards you think, gee whiz, I could have done this too. And so this is a failure which is probably, maybe you regret even more than if you tried hard and you learn a lot of things on the side. And the other thing which I think is important for young students to learn, so I made this experience often that students come, so we discuss and say, look, try this and this, go to the lab, and we make a plan. And they think they are successful if they succeed in doing what I told them. But if they always succeed in what I tell them, my life is completely boring. I mean, there's never anything new. I tell them, do this, I think probably this will come out. It comes out. Look, I mean, then I'm probably in the wrong. So it is much more interesting for me as a group leader that the student comes, what you told me doesn't work. I said, oh, okay. So then it becomes really interesting. And then you can also get the attention of your group leader much better if you find that what the group leader told you that might probably come out does not come out. Like in your case, the hypothesis does not work. This is a very interesting experience for your supervisor. I mean, that was his hypothesis, so you must have been interested. Why did it not work? And from this, then you'll learn a lot. But it's something that the group does jointly, and in a good group, and I think in most groups it will work this way, and that's why many students succeed in working on a problem for many years, which is not so easy. You have to have a high frustration tolerance, and I think it helps to have the support of the group. Normally, I mean, you could also, after a few months, you work on something without obvious success. It's not so clear why should I continue this. But for many important problems, this is not long enough. You have to work on it for years. This is why PhD theses are of that time scale. And the important thing is to stick with this and not get frustrated. And it's the group together that each member helps each other, independent of what the role is.
Maybe I can tell you, I just say a personal experience, right? When I started my PhD, so you come with a mindset, right? That I want to be successful, and success is defined in a nature or science publication, right? I mean, the community, that's what the success is defined, right? So in the beginning, my supervisor just, so I started with a project stopped, then I was moved to another lab, another type of project, then I was assisting some other PhD student. So I moved to 3-4 experiments in the first 3 years, right? And I was so frustrated and so angry because I was like, okay, there is nothing coming out of these things for me. There is no publication out of it with me as a first author, so what I'm doing, right? But now that years has passed, now I see the value of such experience, right? Because now I have a very good overview of so many experiments that I did and how the projects were handled and some other stuff that they are not, summarized in a science publication. So I think it's good also to look at success a little bit from a broader point of view, that I see it now in my life, right? I was a very upset student at my 3rd year of PhD, but now I'm very happy that I have these experiences in all these labs, in all these different experiments. So that also, I think we all should change a little bit our view to success somehow. The experiment doesn't work, but it gives you experience, right?
That is a very good point, because to measure success only in Science and Nature papers is a bit stupid. Yeah. I mean, there are a few editors, a handful in each of them, and they decide about success of the whole community. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's whether you succeed in doing something, you eventually get experience, and it's the whole community that decides about this. I mean, there are many examples where only after some time things are recognized, and to just focus on the acceptance rate by Science and Nature is a bit. This is a hype, I know, but I don't like it, and it's not to the point. There are even some people who say that in order to get into these journals, you cannot do something which is too new, because then they will kind of reject it from the beginning. So if you have something really revolutionary, which is really crazy, remember my first statement, they probably, you don't accept crazy things, and then you publish in some not so well-known journal. But also these not so well-known journals sometimes have papers which are cited 100 or 3,000 times. It's exactly because of this, because sometimes something which is not recognized in the beginning later turns out to be really good. So I think what is a better measure is the kind of like the recognition by the scientific community in the long run. But of course, I understand it doesn't work because you don't want to wait 30 years before you apply for a job. So, there is.
But don't forget, there's not only the academic way. So there are also career options in industry.
Sure.
And of course, you could also start a company. And yes, from my point of view, this is also some kind of success.
Sure.
And to start a company, well, I don't know if it really helps if you have some Nature papers in the back.
No.
So there must be something different. You have to be some economic
but some people here said we're always talking about Science and Nature papers, so I want to make this comment. No, this is a different world.
But I think this is a specific thing in Germany, that in the education system, that the education system is focusing strongly on the career in the academic world. And especially if you look, for example, for Max Planck Society, they have a strong focus on a career in the academic world. On the other hand, 90% of the PhD students are going to industry or doing something completely different. And they do not fail. They are taking a different path.
Of course.
And they can be, and they can be successful, and they can be pioneers in some different areas.
Of course.
I think this is very important, and we are also talking today about our idea of the Max Planck School, Gerd, and when designing this school, we have had also in mind that we should educate the students in that direction, that there are different career paths to go for. And that, of course, we have to develop an education program which supports these different career paths. I think this is very important, and so don't focus on publications. This is some kind of measure, but there are also other measures which define success.
I quickly want to just name this question because maybe then you can answer directly. It's perfectly okay here. So we had two questions. I think one you answered already. It's kind of, do you see failure as gasoline to drive, as driver for success? And the next one here is, do you think it could be possible to change the mindset in academia regarding success, meaning number, prestige of papers, etc.? I don't know if this was the direction where you would like to go.
There are two things. So I think with the science and the nature papers, it's actually the scientific professorship who make the decisions on whom to hire.
Exactly.
And they use these measures as a measure for whom to hire. So I think it's then on the scientific community,
Sure.
the leadership,
Of course.
to make the decisions on changing the system. That's one point to that question. The other thing on the industry, I think, it's in particular for physics that the industry path may be not seen as enriching, but actually I've decided very early on that I wanted to go to industry because I had the experience at HP in Palo Alto as an intern, and I realized that I can do not only write a paper, but I can bring something into a product. I can have a really very enriching and satisfying experience of doing something which is of relevance to someone, and not only writing a paper which no one may read, or only like 100 people and 10 may cite it. So this is actually, in the end, if you look at it from that perspective, can be very irrelevant, the paper you write, because it may not have the big impact you think it can have. And so I think thinking about really bringing things into a product, bringing things into the society, solving a challenging problem, that's actually what people should aspire to. And whether this is, bringing into the solar industry something, into renewable energy, there's so many sophisticated societal problems we have to solve. Where the physics, where the engineering, where the, the computer science, where all these things are important to come together to solve these problems, which is actually very enriching if you can say, hey, there is this OLED display and I contributed to this, right? And I think that's many people don't experience this because they don't get the step out of the university. They don't make this experience. And I had the luck that I got this internship and kind of early on made this experience where I saw there is something else, which is very interesting, but I think many actually remain in the university and the academic environment and don't see actually what's possible outside.
I think specifically here in your field, it might even be more open in comparison to other fields. I mean, we now have these days the career fairs, so there is a possibility to network, to get to know another world as well. And maybe you get this chance and you're like, yes, and go for it, like you did. And maybe you feel like, no, university is like, I'm research, I'd like to stay there. However, it's always to be open, right? And to talk to people and help them decide. So for example, how do you deal with it? When your student comes to you and is like, oh, I don't know how to deal with the situation, or I don't know how to continue.
Well, first, if the student comes to me, then he or she has studied physics or photonics or some kind of engineering, something related to that. So, which is a good thing to begin with, because there is a clear path in industry which he or she can pursue. Yeah, for a lot of subjects, this matter is not as clear. So there's like an integrated, I'm not going to even call it plan B, it's like a plan A prime that you can pursue, yeah? But typically, after a while, you will know if like the academic world is for you, yeah? Or if you'd, rather pursue your very own idea and your own startup, or, whether you want to work for a company. And so in optics and photonics, a lot of my colleagues, my fellow PhD students now working for companies, they still do research. Yeah, they get to spend more time in the lab than I do, I have to admit. Yeah, so and it's a good career path. Yeah, and it's one which is not reliant on these on nature and science papers, which sometimes depend on luck, which is not so reliant on having being assigned this one experiment by your supervisor that may work out, or in your case may not work out. Yeah, and so a while ago you asked like how do you make sure that your students, even if their project does not work, still have something valuable out of it? And I think you need to make sure that they work in the team in different projects. Yeah? That even if one of the projects or their core project is not as productive, they still get exposed to a large, let's say, pool of methods. Yeah? And that they can still contribute to the success of other projects, which still gives them visibility. Yeah? And so I think that's the point I'm liking to make.
We are tackling here so many issues, and you said it before. I love that you were a very sad student, and I completely am with you. I think all of us have been a sad student at some point, all upset because things just don't work out. And it's just interesting because more and more young scientists are sharing the experience on social media. So kind of fancy is Instagram to share how PhD is going and how they feel about it. So I read a lot about it, and I'm amazed because, of course, Instagram didn't exist when I used to do that, so it was my colleague, Mimi. But however, you see there's a transparency for people how to deal with the stress, because they all love science. They're all like, yes, science. But it's very hard for them. So I think the role you have, we said teaching is important to change the culture. It's an opportunity, but also a big challenge for you to give this to the next generation, right? To help them find new ideas. How did you call it? Submarine projects.
Yeah.
Oh, give the chance to go to a fair and meet other enterprises, and also say, publication, it's okay.
So I should probably add to this as an encouraging statement to some of the younger people. So I worked in industry for several years and without any publication. But then I got an offer to join the faculty at the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg. So I didn't have any science and nature papers during this time. So it's true that the people who decide whom to hire, they look at a person, but they not necessarily look at these papers. So this already has happened in the past. And I myself, I also, when I hired people, I tried to find out about the personality. Do I think that this person fits in my group? Because I want them to work jointly together, because we talked about this, we are one team, and not so much how many papers there are. So I think for those young people that worry about some of these bibliometric data or so there's also such encouraging messages.
You were nodding before. You wanted to add something to what we said?
No, I hope it works for me like this also. I hope this point of view goes on, and spread in the community somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a topic you could discuss forever, but then it's like, it depends on the situation very much, and also on the personality. So you all seem to be very careful on the selection whom you work with, so that the team works out fine, that the person fits to the project and to the, let's say, to what comes next. So if I'm good for industry, then and you see that, you would say, Uli, you should maybe try and go in this direction. And
so I think you mentioned it also, right? I mean, we do a lot of research, and actually probably sometimes more. If you're at university, you also have to teach, and you have to have other commitments, right? If you're a research staff member in my team, you probably have more time for doing the research. And we also work with PhD students, with postdocs, and many of our postdocs also, they came to us to do a postdoc, and then they also went back as professor, or they went to a company, or they created their startup. You really find everything. And I think that's also the possibility I think you have. And you need to decide what do you like? And this may also, of course, change, as in your case, right? You go to industry, and then you may go to academia. So, and then perhaps you create your startup soon. So there are different things which can be done. I think you really have to love what you do, and then have the passion for it.
Yeah, I think it's just difficult when you are feeling like the pressure is too much. This is one question we had here, like, let me put forward the following thesis, yeah? Excessive pressure to perform ends many promising scientific careers premature. At the same time, however, we often hear diamonds are only created under pressure. So, this is like the German also education, like von nichts kommt nichts, you have to work harder and you have to stick to it. So how's this balance in between? What do you think about these two contradictory?
It's a competition, right? So you are in a competitive environment and you have to put as much as you can in, right? But the mental health is also equally important, because if you are not happy, you don't put your full energy and your attention in the lab. So I think, for me, the first thing is that you should love what you do. That takes you in the lab, actually. And then that helps you to ease the pressure somehow. But it is a competition also, right? So there is pressure, I think. At least. And then you should really, I think that you should really work passionately and put energy as much as you can. But you should be careful about the mental health and motivation. That's it.
Mm-hmm. I would say if my boss would say to me, like, diamonds are forged under pressure and it was not a joke, you need to walk away. Full stop. Because this is a specific example, and I'm not sure if it's a real world example or just something that was written in chat. This is, what does it help you? Yeah, except for amplifying the pressure that you already feel. Yeah. So and there's also methods to make diamonds which go with low pressure now.
It takes time also.
As a scientist.
Yeah, that's true. But it's an educational model. Like, if you put enough pressure, then it works.
But I think the pressure is there irrespective of it. Yeah. All the nice things we can say and all of the schemes we have to create alternative opportunities for our students. There is a high level of pressure in academia. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And probably in industry the same thing. Yeah? If you don't keep on innovating, somebody else will. Yeah, and they will take your market. But there's just certain, you don't need to communicate this down the chain and kind of pass it down the chain, and because somebody's going to be at the tail end of that and he can't pass it on or she can't pass it on to whatever he or she's working with. So
but I think it is amplify somehow. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think what Falk tried to say is that there is no need to amplify this pressure which exists anyway, right?
Yeah. But I think it's important that there is a commitment on both sides.
Yeah.
There's a commitment by the supervisor, but it's also important that there's a commitment by the PhD student working on a specific project. And this, from my point of view, is very important because then you have these group dynamics and it's also some kind of sustainable activity then, which arise from these commitments on both sides.
So I think it's also the role of the supervisor to assign something to the student and help the student to find something that is well suited to the students, because we are all different, but most people are good at something. So it's if you want to be successful with your group, the best thing is to find for each of your group members what can he or she do best, and then let her do this. Yeah. And then you don't need to add any pressure. As you said, he or she will do this with pleasure and work more hours than necessary from the legal side.
Or the normal hours, right? But with attention.
But you focus yourself. And this is the much better way than to put additional pressure. On the long run, this doesn't work and it will not be successful. I know some people try this, but this doesn't work.
Good to hear that. That's, again, very optimistic. Thank you very much. We are almost done with our time. I'd like to sum up some things I took now from you. At the very beginning, we tried to define a tiny bit failure, and you said it's a path of evolution. We all kind of agreed that it's needed for success. So if you don't fall, you don't know what you did wrong, and you cannot learn from it. I heard that taking risks is okay. On the other hand, that it's super important that you have a group or a network, somebody supporting you also and giving you plan B. That, of course, one should be brave when trying out new things, love what you do. Anything you would like to add? Your final statement. You can look directly into your respective cameras so the audience knows what your tip for the future is, or your motivational final words.
have fun with the things you are doing. I think this is always the best choice, and I think it is a part also of this risk-taking and also of the question how to handle a mistake or a failure. I think it is important that you have a commitment to the topic, that you have a commitment to the group, but there is also support from the group for the things you are doing and you plan to do.
I think specifically also for the students, I would say you need to be passionate about what you do. You need to really love it, because it's clear that for a PhD you also have to spend some time on it. So you better love what you do, and you also should have great mentors, right? It's really that you can go there, you can talk with them, they can give you advice, share their experiences, that you don't feel alone in what you do, right? That you feel integrated in the team and that you feel it's really a teamwork. But you also have, of course, your part to contribute to the team.
Thank you.
I would say, I mean, this is about failure, right? Talk about your failures. Talk about it all the time. In the worst case, you will have a good and enjoyable time talking about, where you fucked up. In the ideal case, you will find help from places where you just didn't expect it from. Yeah, and this is also a way of forging networks. Yeah? And yeah, this is my advice regarding failure.
Nice one.
So I would say in science, we are all given this chance, this unique chance from society to work on something cool that's unknown, right? So as a student, you have to solve this very big problem, but you are not the only person who should alone solve this problem. So there is always a team, that there should be communication, and there is a team to support you. So there is no need to panic, because so many people are around you to help you to solve this problem. And yeah, if you have to love it. So if you love it, you enjoy it. If you don't love it, then you don't have to do it also, right? So that's it. Teamwork and love it.
So this gives me the opportunity to add that there are also cool things outside science and academia that you can do when you work in industry, like in a big company that can afford to support almost basic research, or smaller companies where they don't have these resources. But wherever you go, whether you're in science or in small, big companies, small, whatever, there are interesting challenges. You can have satisfying experiences, and you will be able to have a good life. And no matter what you do, there will be experience. And experience will be part of it. And as we heard, some people call experience failure, but I mean, you don't have to use that word. But you will have this experience anyway.
Whether you like it or not. And better you make something good out of it.
Yeah.
And by these final words, we already come to the end of this discussion round. Thank you very much for all your input. It was really amazing. I think people would like to ask more questions, but they will have to wait until the next Photonic Days, I suppose, or just get in touch with you. Thank you very much. We also now come to the end of the Photonic Days itself, and we are delighted that we had such a huge, amazing, interesting program. So many different aspects we learned. You in the audience participated, you met, you networked, and you were here part of the discussion. Thank you very much for that. Before I hand over for the last words to Professor Tünnermann, I would like to say thank you also to the audience, again to you speakers from my side, and bye-bye.